Hello, everyone. All right, I need to, before I get started, I just need to make sure that we can hear sound from a screen share. I gotta mute. Just make sure I can hear this. Yes, we can. Mute. Just make sure I can hear this. Yes, we can. All right, I think we can. I hope we can. Do you hear? Okay, I hope that you guys heard that. If you could say in the comments, that would be helpful to see that you did hear. I'm going to start it one more time just to make sure. All right, do you hear that? All right, you heard that. Thank you, Dolores. Thank you. Okay, welcome. Tonight is, I'm going to be giving my second rehearsal of an introduction to real-world economics. MMT is a part of real-world economics. So let's get this started. Nope. There you go. This is my second of 3 rehearsals. I'm going to be giving it in person in 3 Tuesdays, whatever, April 5th or Tuesday night. And it's going to be, just for context, it's going to be to an over 55 conservative audience. So I'm looking for feedback to improve this presentation. If you have any, please let me know, and you can keep that in mind as context. I want to thank Beyond the Spectrum for the graphics in this presentation, and for Kerberos Media for the platform. Okay, so briefly about me. I've studied modern money theory, which is an important part of real-world economics, for 4 years. I know a good amount. I'm not an academic or an economist, but I know a good amount. I've taken 2 academic courses. I host a podcast called Activist MMT, and has lots of episodes. There's a link to see the episodes, and there's other things. I'll just leave that up just for a minute, and then we'll get started with the real stuff. Okay, there we go. So disclaimer, I'm not an academic. I'm not an economist. I know a decent amount. I've been studying this for 4 years, but I don't speak for the MMT project. And I don't pretend that this is perfectly accurate. And if there's a way that you think it can be improved, please let me know. You can email me. So why am I giving this talk? Why is this important to me? Because we face several catastrophic problems, and each of these problems requires a bold solution. I don't expect that we're going to agree on the solutions, and that's fine. I do hope that we can agree on many of, or most of, or all of the problems. So those problems include, first and foremost, inequality of both income and wealth, pollution and ecological crisis, involuntary unemployment and involuntary underemployment. I have a job, it sucks. I'm trying to find another one, but I can't. That's involuntary underemployment, homelessness, poverty, and so on. Before we get started talking about real-world economics, I wanted to ask you to think about how you believe the economy works right now, how you believe it, how you understand it works, how you've grown up to, been told that it works. How does the national government pay for things? How do they do that? Taxing people, borrowing from China. How does the national government pay for things? Okay, given that's how they pay for things, what makes it difficult for the government to do it? What constraints do they have? It's difficult to get people to agree on who should be taxed. It's difficult to get the rich to tax the rich a lot because they're so powerful. And China is our enemy. Why would we want to borrow from China? What are the constraints that the government faces, knowing that the government works in the way that you currently believe it does? All right, just think about it. Third, what When the national government pays for things in that way, what problems does it cause? When it does anything, whether it's for people or for rich people, what problems does it cause when the government pays for things in that way? And finally, what good things is only the national government capable of, that not even the biggest corporation or states are capable of doing? What good things can only the government do? And the obvious example is military, protecting us. Okay? So think about these things. Now, let's get into real world economics. Okay? First concept is issuer versus a user. The national government is a money issuer, creator, issuer. Everything and everyone but the national government are money users. They can't create it. They can't issue it. Money users include you and me, households, companies, local city and state governments, even California, and all other countries, China, Russia, Kenya, everyone. Nearly every country issues its own money and bonds, treasuries. And every other country can only use that money. They can't create it. They can't delete it, destroy it. And so from now on, when I say in this presentation, when I say government, I only mean national government, okay? Because state and local governments are completely different. I'm only talking about national government, so I'm just going to say government. Money users. We have to get money before we can spend it. Earn it in a paycheck, steal it, beg for it, find it on the street. We have to get money from somewhere, somehow, before we can spend it. Okay? So now I've gotten it from my paycheck, and now I spend it. My spending is your income when I buy something from you. My spending is your income. Then they spend it, and their spending is somebody else's income, and their spending is somebody else's income, and on and on and on. And it cycles around the economy over and over again. There is nothing else that we can do. It can only change hands. The money issuer, the government, issues money into existence. And in fact, it is impossible for the government to spend except by creating more money. The only way that the government can spend is to create more money. It just pops into existence. And then when money comes back to the government, it pops out of existence. There is no money in the government. The government does not have any of its own money in a practical sense. And it accounts for it. It has lots of ledgers showing who has what and where in the economy. But the government itself, in a practical sense, does not have any of its own money. So the government creates its own money. It spends for some program. It doesn't just create it because it's fun to create it. It creates it for a purpose. It goes into someone's hands. It cycles around through the economy. You buy something, it's somebody else's income. They buy something, it's somebody else's income, and so on and so on and so on. And then some of it goes out of the economy in taxes back to the government and pops out of existence. Okay? To the government, their money is a concept. It's not a thing. Other examples of issuers. Money issuer, the government is a money issuer. A writer is a word issuer. They can only create their books, their phrases, their poems by issuing new words. It's the only way that they can do it. Scorekeepers at a game can only award, they issue points. They're score issuers. They can only award new points. They can only award a point by issuing a new one. And at the end of the game, all of those points are zeroed out, they're deleted. And finally, think about math. Calculator on a piece of paper. You have 900, you add 100 to it, you get 1,000. Where did that 100 come from? Now the other side, you have 1,000 You minus 100, you get 900. Where did that 100 go? And the answer is it didn't go anywhere because it never existed in the first place. It's a concept. It's not a thing. Now, most governments create their own money. Some governments, and generally speaking, the most powerful ones, only are money issuers. The United States, the UK, Australia, Japan, Canada, and others are only money issuers. Yes, they do borrow and transact in other countries' money, but it is to a very small degree, so small that we're going to say that they don't do it at all. They're only money issuers. This means that these countries have the most flexibility and the least constraints. There are other countries which they issue their own money, or at least a lot of them do. The Eurozone nations do not. They use the euro. But there are a lot of countries that don't just issue their own money. They use the money of another country. They have a loan in, for example, United States dollars. Turkey has loans in United States dollars. The dollar is a kind of money that Turkey does not create or control. So they are a currency user to the United States, just like me and you. They're a big one, but they're just another currency user. They also issue their own money, but they're also money users, and that's the important part because that restricts them. That means they have less flexibility and more constraints. Those loans are imposed on less powerful nations by the United States and the UK and so on through institutions such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. And in addition, other countries such as Zimbabwe has had severe real-world issues by plummeting food production. Their food production plummeted by 50% in a year, which caused severe real-world problems that money had nothing to do with. Now, when you hear, if we do something in the United States, it's going to turn the U.S. into Venezuela or 1920s Weimar or Zimbabwe. It's going to cause hyperinflation. And this is doing a false comparison because Venezuela and Weimar and Zimbabwe are all, number one, currency users of other countries' money, which they can't control. And they also have some of them had severe real world problems. Weimar lost the war. Their production was devastated. And they had foreign debt imposed on them for losing the war. So more powerful nations use economics to coerce less powerful nations into predatory loans. And they use non-payment as an excuse to coerce even more. Okay, now, next concept. Governments are not the only entity that creates money. Banks also do. Importantly, banks only do it because the government allows them to do it. They're sanctioned by the government to do so. So MMT says that only banks and their agents can create money. Banks are an agent of the government. So the government can only spend by creating more money. It's the only possible way for them to spend. Banks can only lend by creating more money. It's the only possible way for them to lend. There are some very, very small exceptions for banks, not for governments. So 97% of our money in our economy was created by banks, only 3% by the government. So does that mean that banks are that much more important than the government? Let's talk about it. There's a difference between a loan and a gift. So what is more important to you? No. What is more desirable for you? A $100 loan or a $100 gift? Which would you prefer? A loan, you have to pay back 100% of plus interest, and you are not out of debt until you completely pay it back. A gift, you get to keep. No strings attached. All bank-created money, without exception, is a loan. Most government created money after taxes is a gift. Only the government has the ability to create money as a gift. So that 3% is really, really important. It's not the 97 3% ratio is not a reflection of banks are that much more important than government. It's actually more a reflection of the neglect of our federal representatives, depriving us of what is desperately needed and forcing people to take out loans, pull out a credit card, get a payday loan for things that for things that maybe shouldn't have a cost to begin with or shouldn't be so ridiculously high priced. Pharmaceuticals. And banks and the government play crucial roles in the economy. A crucial role of the bank is to allow people to spend money that they do not, no, a crucial role of the bank is to allow people to spend money that they have, but is not currently liquid. So I have an asset that's going to mature in 3 months. I have plenty of money, but I can't access it for 3 months. So that's a perfect reason to go to the bank and take out a loan so I can use that during these 3 months for something that I need to do. That's a crucial role of a bank. The Great Depression and the Great Financial Crash were both caused by unprecedented levels of loans, of personal loans, personal debt, due to, and many of them defaulted, and they were due to predatory loans, white collar crime, and neglect. Okay, now, next concept. What would happen if Congress repealed the law of gravity? They repealed the law of gravity. The president signed it into law. The media, the newspapers and news channels said it's official. Gravity has been repealed. The law of gravity has been repealed. So we're talking about a scientific law and a legal law. So if Congress actually did this, and they certainly could, they could certainly write up, repeal the law of gravity law. No problem, pass it. Do you really think that gravity cares about what Congress thinks? We're talking about a scientific law and a legal law. They're both laws, but just because they have the same name does not mean that they are in any way related. They are completely different. They are completely different concepts. They just have the same name. And the same is true. The same profound difference is true between personal debt and national debt. They have the same name. They have nothing to do with each other. So what is personal debt? Personal debt is a bank loan. Personal loan, pulling out a credit card, payday loan, mortgage, they're all personal debt. Bank loans are inherently and always a debt. It must be paid back 100% plus interest. And the only way to not be in debt is to totally pay off your loan. And roughly speaking, in the aggregate, roughly speaking, if you have any bank created money, that means you are by definition in debt. The only way to not be in debt is to not have bank created money. Roughly speaking, that's roughly true. Personal debt has two critical characteristics. Number one, there is a massive power imbalance between the lender and the borrower. If you don't pay back your loan, they will make your life miserable. Repossess your home, garnish your wages. The bank has the tools of the state at its disposal. You don't. You can declare bankruptcy, have it on, kind of a defensive thing to do. It certainly won't hurt the bank, not much. And it'll be on your record for 7 years. But that's all you can do. You have no chance against the bank if you don't pay it back. Number two characteristic is a higher authority. Above the lender, the bank, and you is the government. The bank has the tools of the state at its disposal. You don't. Now, national debt. We hear all the time the United States must borrow its own money from China. Only the United States can create it. Only the United States can delete it, destroy it. China can't. But we hear all the time the United States must borrow its own money from China. And remember that the government can only spend by creating more money. It is a ridiculous statement, just completely ridiculous. But let's pretend briefly that it's true. The United States must borrow its own money from China. Those two critical characteristics. Is there a massive power imbalance between the lender, so-called lender, China, and the so-called borrower, the United States? Is there a massive power imbalance between these two? Of course not. They're roughly the same power. Is there a higher authority above China and the United States? Is there a world government? Is there a universe government? Of course not. There is not. There's no higher authority above these two nations. They're peers. And if in this myth, if the United States didn't pay back its loan to China and China said, you're late on your payments and we're going to come and repossess what? The UN? Mount Rushmore? Let them try. Who are they going to be met with? It's a completely different situation in the national context. So when China holds our debt, that is a thing. There is something called debt in the national context. And it's just simply our treasuries, our bonds. China sells products to the United States, which are paid for in the US with dollars. Those dollars are converted to bank reserves so that China itself and Chinese companies can access them. They're changed to bank reserves, which are US dollars. They're just in the Treasury and the Federal Reserve. Bank reserves are essentially a checking account. They pay little to no interest. Chinese people are smart, and they would rather have lots of interest. They would rather have more interest. So they choose to convert those reserves, that checking account, that money that doesn't make money or very little, into bonds, into treasuries, which makes a lot more interest. So they get regular interest income. So when China holds our debt, it just means that we paid them for stuff that we bought. It's just another form of payment. That's all it is. And when the reserves are changed to a bond, which is essentially a checking account, to a savings account, it's just exchanging money, exchanging green money that doesn't make interest for yellow money that does make interest. It's the same amount. Yellow gives more interest income. The green money does not. It's another form of payment. China also holds US treasuries in order to manage their exchange rate. This is necessary in order to balance the profits of Chinese companies with the prices that, in the case of US treasuries, that the prices that United States customers have to pay. If either of these go out of control, then these Chinese companies won't make money because these United States customers won't buy it. And the only way they can do that is by managing their exchange rate by selling and buying US treasuries. Or a major way. Okay, so when we hear China might dump its debt as an act of war, again, look, China is a big currency user, but they're only a currency user. Only thing that money can do among currency users is exchange hands. China can't delete these bonds. They can't create these bonds, and they can't change the maturity date on the bonds that they own. So if they sell them in mass, they might sell them to Japan. So in the treasury, $1 trillion in bonds that was China, change it to Japan. That's all you do. The treasury still exists, but instead of being owned by China, now they're owned by Japan. Same amount of money, still there, The only thing that China can do if they tried to do that is hurt their ability to manage their exchange rate. And they want to sell us stuff. They don't want to do that. Worrying about the national debt is kind of like worrying about this. Is it really meaningful to know how many points the stadium gave out tonight? That's the stadium deficit. Is it really meaningful? Is there any value in knowing the total amount of points that the stadium has ever given out to all teams? Is that a really valuable piece of information? Is that an interesting piece of information? That's the stadium debt. No, it's a novelty. Very mildly interesting, but does it really have any impact on any practical sense as far as how the stadium is run? Okay, so that's all the concepts I'm going to talk about. And now I want to talk about the implications. So what are the implications of understanding real-world economics? I'm going to check comments just to make sure I'm still being heard. What? Wait, exit full screen. Okay. All right, good. Just want to make sure there was no comments of, I can't hear you. All right. Oops, this should be full screen. Sorry about that. Okay, so what is the importance of understanding real-world economics? Number one is it illuminates that all of these things that we hear all the time from important people on the news, all of these things we hear all the time screamed at the top of their lungs, but, we can't do things for the people, but, because it'll balloon the deficit, it'll balloon the debt, but China may dump its debt and cause, an act of war. It may violate the debt ceiling. We don't want to do that. So what it does is and of course, how are you going to pay for it? How's the national government going to pay for it? All of these things leverage the false notion that the personal context, our personal experience, our individual experience is the same as a national experience when it comes to money. So we conflate these two incorrectly. And they use that misunderstanding to make us think that the national government has the same kinds of restrictions and constraints as you and I do. And so what ends up happening is that we needlessly throttle the capacity of our government. So when it comes to helping average people, healthcare, education, saving the planet from climate change, these are the things that we hear screamed over and over and over again. But when it comes to helping the rich, we don't hear any of it. None of it. Bailouts, subsidies, tax breaks, war. We never hear these questions when it comes to the rich. I wonder why. The reality is that the only way for those on top to stay on top is to exploit the rest of us. It's the only way. False economics is a shield to deceive the exploited into thinking that depriving them is unfortunate but necessary. And this comes from, I kind of knew this, but this was very deeply reinforced by Karl Polanyi's book, The Great Transformation. I wrote a summary of it. I've done 4 interviews on it. It is a profound piece of work. But that's one of its major conclusions. When you give the poor, when you give average people anything, it makes them more powerful. And so that difference between the rich and the poor grows smaller. So in other words, the rich can't be rich by having a lot. They can only be rich by having a lot more than everybody else. So a big piece of staying on top is to prevent those below from getting what they need, because giving them anything is about giving them power. I need you to not be here right now. I'll be done in a few minutes. So we can't change. Who is in government now will not do anything for the people. They're marinated in bribes. That's their job, is to not do stuff for average people. We cannot change those who are currently at the levers of power. It's not possible. They are irredeemable, my opinion. But the only way we can change them is to get rid of them. The only way to get rid of them is to understand that it's possible to do things for the people. In other words, the people currently at the levers of power are terrible, but that doesn't mean that the levers themselves, the institution, is terrible. It has the power to do for us. I'm sorry, hold on a moment. So there is the institution and there is those in the institution. Okay? We can't change those at the levers of power, until we understand what's possible. Not being deceived by false economics is a huge step. Understanding real world economics and not buying into that deception is a huge step. That's why I am sharing this tonight. So understanding what is impossible is necessary to change those in power, is to get rid of them. And the only way to understand what's possible is to understand real world economics. And why? We have multiple catastrophic problems that can only be addressed by the national government. The free market is not going to save us from climate change. It's not possible. The government can do bold things that are desperately needed by millions of people, and they're the only institutions that can do some of it. They're the only institutions that are capable of doing some of these bold solutions. There may be other reasons for them not to do it. You may disagree. You may not want them to do it, and that's fine. If you don't want them to give healthcare to everyone, that's fine. I disagree, and I will fight against you, but I respect that. I respect that opinion. What I don't respect is when you use false economics as the only excuse for withholding what the millions desperately need. You're choosing not to do it, and that's fine. But you can't say that it's unfortunate but necessary. So to end this, I want to show a 5-minute video of Warren Mosler basically validating much of what I've said tonight. He is the person that the ideas of, there's 25 years of scholarship, there's literature and papers, and much of it is based on the seed that he created, the ideas that he created. He's a former bank owner, a financial trader. So let's listen to him, and he's going to validate pretty much of what I'm going to say. Is that it? Here we go. And I'm going to look in the comments to verify that you can hear this. I believe that you can, but just to check. Okay, there's no sound. I'm sorry. This is my first time trying to use sound. I'm going to need some support, so forgive me. But you can trust me that he pretty much validates pretty much everything that I say, and it actually shows three or two Federal Reserve, former Federal Reserve chairman confirming what he says as well. And that confirms much of what I say as far as the government creates money, spends by creating money, and so on. So I forgive me. I'll be able to figure out the audio for next week. I don't exactly know what to do. I've only started doing these live streams. So forgive me. It's a good video, and he basically says I'm right. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I'll look through the comments. I don't know. But anyway, that is the end of the presentation. There are a few extra slides. I have things to read, and you can watch the video yourself. That link works. Oh yeah, I'll put the link to the download this in the chat in just a moment, so you can look through this whole slide deck and click on all the links that I have in there. There's, for those interested in learning more, there's good things to read. There are recommended things to listen to, my own podcast, and things to watch, different lengths, so you can start learning yourself and verifying yourself. Just some extra stuff I'm not going to go over, but you can look yourself of interesting stuff. And that's it. So I will, give me a moment, and I will post the link to the PDF, and then I'll look through the comments. Great. There you go. All right, I'm going to put the link to the PDF in the comments. You can download it and look at the whole thing. Click on the links and look at it at your leisure. I'm going to look through the comments and see if there's anything to respond to. What Noli, forgive me if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. Noli D says, how do they give themselves a 21% raise along with the ungodly amounts of Ukraine and the military industrial complex? But we can't afford things like reparations and money, Medicare for all. When was the last time our military protected like the cops? As well as far as afford, that's the false economics. When they say we can't afford X in the national context only, when they say we can't afford something, what they actually mean is I'm not going to vote for something. That's what they mean. And you have to change when someone says, how are you going to pay for it? You change that in the national context. When someone like a federal representative says, how are you going to pay for it? It means, how are you going to make me vote for it? And when they say we can't afford something, what it actually means is I'm not going to vote for it. Don't even buy into the language of how can we not afford it. It's that language is false economics. Okay. 80% of the common Terry. 80% of the common man's paycheck goes to energy of some kind. Nothing needs invented to phase out all the crony empires and industries. Every child born gives them the right to print more money. Money is okay. I'm not sure about that. The IRS is not a government agency. That's new to me. I'm not aware of that. No, money is money, and it's all based on a promise of gold and silver in exchange. That used to be true. That's not true anymore. That ended in 1971, and that ended in 1971 for all countries, but it ended for the United States back in, like, I think the 1930s. You cannot get gold for your money, or they will not do that for you. Oops. Yes, but the banking government are not going to give you gold. What backs the dollar is the power of the issuing authority. That's what gives money value. Money is valuable. Money is as valuable as the power of the authority that issued it into existence. And the United States is pretty powerful. Not doing great stuff in some ways, but that don't mean that they're not powerful. They're powerful. Yes, nice graphic. Amber, the national debt one. What trusted administration through the United States government are you going to trust to take care of MMT? I don't trust any of them. This is from Jim Young. I don't trust any of them. And that's the whole point, is the only people that we can trust is ourselves. We can't trust those at the levers of power. That's the whole point. We can't trust the people at the levers of power. We need to get them out. And maybe that's impossible. Maybe it's unlikely. But the very first step is to understand how it actually works. You cannot defeat the beast if you don't understand its nature. Yeah, Laurie, will you send me the links? There's a link to download it in the comments, so I can email it to you if you can't get it, but it is there now. The Dropbox link. What are the ways the government creates money? Does it just print it, or can they otherwise create money? Printing does not happen in the context of passing laws. The only actual physical printing of money only occurs in response to people wanting to take money out of their bank through an ATM or the teller. The only way that money is created in the sense that a law is passed is to make a number bigger in a computer spreadsheet at the Federal Reserve. That's the only way. It's the only way that they can create money in the context of passing a law. Does the U.S. have any foreign debt in the currency of another country? Yes, they do, but not much. Meaning they haven't taken out foreign loans from other countries to a degree that affects their ability to manage their own currency. How and why does currency pop in and out of government treasury? By making a number bigger. The same way that when you say 1,000 minus 100, or same way when you say 900 plus 100, that 100 popped into existence because you typed 100. That is exactly the same way how it happens when the government passes a law into existence. Thanks for being here, Laurie. We'll talk. That's the person I'm going to be doing this presentation for in a couple of weeks. I love the idea of NMT and universal basic income and so many needed social services that are falling apart by the day, but not with the World Economic Forum hanging around. The only thing we have are ourselves. The only way that we can get to the levers of power is to stop being fooled by false economics, among other things. And the only way that we can do that is to understand how it really works and to understand what's really possible and to realize how desperately we need to do some of those things that only the government can do. Only the government can save us from climate change. Only governments can save us from climate change. Only governments, national governments, can really do healthcare in a way that won't make us have to go bankrupt when we're sick. Only governments can handle military. Only governments can handle networks such as phones and internet and mail, postal mail, and pipes, water and gas. Yes, there are private companies that do some of that work, but the management as the whole of the whole nation, that network, can only be done on a national scale. So, all right, that's some questions. I'll wait a minute more, but I hope that was useful. If you think this presentation could be better, get in touch. My email's in the presentation. You can leave some comments. But thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. So it was about 37 minutes long, something like that. And I'm sorry about the video. I'll try and figure that out for next week. Thank you all for being here and for your interesting comments. And I will see you next week for rehearsal number 3.